Hello, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on the Preservation Assistance Grant Program for the 2021 and 2022 deadlines. My name is Margaret Walker-Clare. I am a Senior Program Officer in the Division of Preservation and Access at NEH. Today, you may hear me referring to this program by its acronym, PAG, and also to the Notice of Funding Opportunity as the NOFO. The Notice of Funding Opportunity is available on grants.gov as well as on the NEH website. It has all of the information needed to complete an application. While there will be time for some questions at the end, I am joined today by my colleague, Program Officer Adriana Cutler, who will be monitoring our question box. So please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available online after it finishes today. Today, I will review what the PAG program funds, examples of funded projects, details on developing an application, the review criteria, how to submit an application, and the review process. The Preservation Assistance Grant Program is administered by NEH's Division of Preservation and Access, which is one of 7 divisions and offices that run grant programs. For a bit of background, we consider this to be NEH's outreach program. We try to make it easy to pull together an application and encourage first-time applicants to NEH. We hope that having a PAG can act as a helpful gateway to future federal grants for your organization, whether in this program or in others. First and foremost, what does this program fund? We recognize that in small organizations, implementing preservation needs happens incrementally. So this program is designed to cover a wide range of needs, to encourage repeat applications, and to support a combination of activities. At its heart, the point of this program is to enable small and mid-sized organizations to bring in outside experts in conservation and in preservation to provide advice and to build capacity. If your organization has not had a general preservation needs assessment, that might be a good place to start and can help to establish priorities going forward. You would want to identify a consultant whose preservation skills and experiences are related to the types of collections that are the focus of your project. For instance, you may require a conservator with a specialty in objects or paper or paintings. Similarly, you will want to find a consultant who is knowledgeable about the preservation of collections in your type of institution, whether a library, archive, museum, or other cultural heritage organization. Second, you may have identified a specific issue in the preservation of your collections and desire a focused consultation with a preservation professional. These more specific needs might include the care of digital collections, establishing environmental monitoring programs, emergency preparedness, including for continuity of operations, and item-level conservation surveys. Third, if a consultant has recommended that your organization would benefit from preservation supplies, such as acid-free storage boxes, archival photo sleeves, archival shelving, or environmental monitoring equipment, such as data loggers or light meters, then you may request funds to purchase these. It is a good idea to attach the relevant portions of your previous assessment with this supply recommendation. Purchase of supplies could also be combined with an assessment or a consultation, in which case you should ask your consultant for an estimated preliminary list of supplies for budgeting purposes. Fourth, PAGs support professional development for staff and volunteers who work with cultural heritage collections. Education and training can be in preservation topics, such as handling and storage of collections, or topics that support enhanced access, such as best practices for cataloging or for digitization. Training may take place in person or virtually. Furthermore, if your organization is located within a federally declared disaster area, you may request funding to support further recovery efforts related to your collection. For instance, this is the only situation under which the PAG program funds conservation treatment work. If this applies to you, please review the NOFO carefully and contact us with any specific questions. And you may combine these activities. For instance, hiring a consultant for a preservation assessment and purchasing recommended supplies, or purchasing supplies for rehousing and bringing in a consultant to educate staff and volunteers on best practices for storage, handling, and display. The funding limit for any combination of these activities is $10,000. Know that cost sharing is not required in this program. Your project may take up to 18 months to complete, beginning as early as September 1st in the year that you apply. NEH's agency-wide initiative, A More Perfect Union, promotes a deeper understanding of American history and culture and advances civic education and our core principles of government, and commemorates the American semi-quincentennial in 2026. NEH welcomes consideration of diverse topics in American history, from Native American culture to rural life, to the rise of the industrial city, from the Civil War to the Cold War to the Civil Rights Movement. We also seek projects that examine foundational documents in U.S. history, as well as projects that examine historical objects, places, traditions, events, and individuals who collectively shaped our states and nation. Applications about the contributions of underrepresented communities are highly encouraged. Projects responding to this initiative through consultations, planning, and pilot activities related to the preservation and access of collections with one or more humanities professionals may request up to $15,000. These applicants may include other PAG activities as well, such as the purchase of preservation supplies. So, who can apply for this grant? Eligible applicants include U.S. nonprofit organizations with 501c3 tax-exempt status, public and 501c3 accredited institutions of higher education, state and local government agencies, and federally recognized Native American tribal governments. Individuals, foreign, and for-profit entities are not eligible to apply. Furthermore, applicants must care and have custody or responsibility for the humanities collections that are the focus of the application, have the equivalent of at least one full-time staff member, whether paid or unpaid, and make collections open and available for research, education, and/or public programming in the humanities. Many of you are probably wondering how we define small or mid-sized. We have no firm requirements here, and rather invite you to explain how you consider your organization to fit into this category within your application. Next, I will offer 3 examples of funded projects. You can find the narrative portion of the application for these 3 projects, among several others, on the program resource page on NEH's website. Spelman College Archives contains 5,000 linear feet of materials that reflect the history of this historically Black college for women established in 1881 and its students. The archives received funding for a general preservation assessment, preservation supplies, including a HEPA vacuum, and a training webinar on developing a deaccessioning plan. This is an example of a case where the institution, Spelman College, is somewhat large, but the unit within it, the archives, is smaller. Chicago Film Archives has over 25,000 audiovisual items in its collection that document the Midwest during the 20th century. Since 2006, it has been creating digital preservation and access copies of its analog materials, which now amount to over 20 terabytes of data. A preservation assistance grant enabled the CFA to work with a digital preservation specialist who developed a digital collections assessment and also consulted with staff who used that assessment to create the organization's digital collections policy. The Noah Webster Foundation and Historical Society of West Hartford is the birthplace of America's famous lexicographer. Its collections include books that belonged to Webster, archival material such as documents, legal documents and correspondence, and objects that document the history of the town. With a PAG award, the organization will embark on various planning activities in consultation with the town historian and a professional archivist to understand how its collections can better support local teachers in history and civic education in the lead up to 2026. Know that in this program, we especially encourage the following types of applicants to apply. Organizations that have never received an NEH award. Community colleges. Hispanic serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, and tribal colleges and universities. Native American tribes, and Native Alaskan and Hawaiian organizations with significant humanities collections, and organizations or collections that represent the contributions of underrepresented communities. Know that if your organization does not line up with one of these areas, you should absolutely still apply. The encouragements are meant to signify particular interests of ours, but they are not meant to privilege certain types of projects or applicants. Knowing that most of our applicants to this program are in small organizations, we try to make developing the narrative as straightforward as possible. The narrative is limited to 5 single-spaced pages. Before sitting down to write it, you might want to do some information gathering with colleagues, audience members, and other stakeholders. Get a good sense of your organization's mission, the scope and the content of your collections, your audience, and what you provide for them. If your audience is the general public, how does that break down? Is it families, lifelong learners, genealogists? Gather some numbers to help illustrate your case, and be sure to have a good sense of previous preservation work or established priorities. Doing this will hopefully make writing a bit easier. It is okay to format your narrative in a short answer approach, listing the questions as they appear in the NOFO and then your response. So first, you will provide a brief summary, just a paragraph or two, about what you hope to accomplish in the project. Questions 2 and 3 are your opportunity to make your collection and its importance shine. Provide us with an overview with regard to size, materials, and date range of the collection, ways that it may fit in with national themes in American history, and interesting specific examples. I know you all have many. And give us a sense of your audiences that will benefit from the preservation of these materials. Question 4 is where you can make a case for how you consider your institution or unit to be small or mid-sized, as well as for how this project aligns with your overall mission. We recognize that improvements in preservation practices happen incrementally in small organizations. Question 5 is an opportunity to provide a brief history of any work leading up to your current proposed project, if relevant. Question 6 should be quite straightforward about why you find this to be so important. And question 7 is an opportunity to provide a brief overview of those from within your organization and the consultants that would be assisting with this project. We recommend that you provide 1 to 2 page resumes for each person in an attachment. And finally, if your organization is located in a federally declared disaster area and requesting funding for projects related to disaster recovery and mitigation, you may include an additional page with more information about your particular circumstances. Please see the NOFO for exact details. The program resource page on the NEH website has a variety of sample narratives, all from funded projects, including the 3 mentioned earlier. We recommend that you take a look at these to get a sense for how people describe their organization's collections and projects. Furthermore, we developed a post titled Tips on Applying for a Preservation and Access Award, which is on our blog. In addition to the narrative, we ask you to include some supporting information, which helps bolster your case for funding. You are required to include a budget using our standard budget form, a budget justification, which is a written explanation of the line items in your budget. For instance, this is where you could include a vendor's quote for archival furniture. If your project includes voluntary cost share, this is where you would indicate it in the budget justification. Your total on your budget form should equal your total request from NEH. Third, you must include a work plan where you outline the specific steps to achieving your project's goals. You may want to format this as a bulleted list or a table. A monthly or quarterly breakdown is often a helpful level of detail, and you may also want to make note of who is working on what. Also, don't forget to build in a little bit of padding time. We all know that shipments arrive late, and snow days can cause unexpected delays. Also, please do include the resumes or CVs for those individuals involved in the project. Several attachments are not strictly required, but they do help to demonstrate your readiness to undertake the project and the significance of it. These include letters of commitment from consultants. These often outline the scope of what the consultant will provide for your organization. A portion of a previous preservation assessment, for instance, to demonstrate the need for certain supplies. Workshop or webinar descriptions if staff professional development is an objective of the project. And other documentation not to exceed 10 pages. This could include images, inventories, or other similar information. Please know that what I've just said is not exhaustive. I hope you will consult the page 20 of the NOFO closely for a full list of the forms and documents that must or may be included in your application package. You'll want to keep the review criteria top of mind while developing your application. These are the questions by which reviewers evaluate your project. 1, the significance of the collections that are the focus of your project and their use in education, research, or public programming in the humanities. The humanities are, of course, central to what we do here. This is the primary lens through which we view grant proposals. 2, the strength of the proposed activities, the adequacy of the plan of work, and the justification of their importance to the institution or institutional unit. And 3, the appropriateness of the experience and the qualifications of consultants and staff. It's very important that you begin early on the practical matters of submitting your application. First, be sure that your organization is registered on sam.gov and grants.gov, and that your registrations are current. Registration in these systems can take up to 1 month, and they must be complete in order to apply. If you are new to the grants.gov system, I would recommend that you spend some time familiarizing yourself with it before you apply. NEH's Program Resource page has a great deal of helpful information for applicants, but you will be submitting your application through grants.gov. The deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on January 14th for the 2021 deadline and on January 13th for the 2022 deadline. We recommend submitting early, as the system can get overwhelmed in those minutes before the deadline. Doing so would also help in the event that you run into technical difficulties, such as submitting an attachment as a Word instead of a PDF format. Grants.gov support is available 24/7. Please do follow the requirements and naming conventions carefully on the PDFs that you develop to upload into grants.gov. And of course, full details on submission of your application can be found on page 25 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. After your application is submitted in January, it will go through NEH's review process. Applications first are sorted into panels with regard to institution or collection type. For instance, historic house museums, public libraries, art collections, and library special collections. Then my colleagues and I identify people like you who work in your field. Each review panel typically includes administrators in small organizations, content specialists, and conservators or other preservation specialists. After peer review, NEH staff makes recommendations. Then, recommendations are reviewed by the National Council on the Humanities, which is a group of 26 presidentially appointed individuals. They, in turn, provide advice to our chairman, who is the person by law who makes all funding decisions. Notifications of these decisions will go out sometime in August for applications submitted in January. After awards are announced, all applicants may request to see their reviewers' written comments. This can prove helpful for improving both a funded project or for developing an application for resubmission if it was not successful. Which brings my presentation to a close. I'd like to go over a few frequently asked questions, and then I will be available to take some live questions. Please submit any questions via the question box. And actually, I'm going to check and make sure that that has been working. It has been. So first, we often receive the question about what, oh no, I see a lot of I can't hear. Okay, it looks like it was okay. First, we often receive the question about what makes an organization sufficiently small or mid-sized to apply. As I've said before, we do not define this in any exact terms, but rather provide you with the opportunity to make a case within the application for why your institution or institutional unit is small or mid-sized. Remember too that this is not one of the review criterion. Second, if my 3 examples left you wondering about more projects and organizations that have been funded under this program, know that you can search our database of all projects funded by NEH. This link can be found in the footer of any page on our website, where you will see the text, "Search all past awards." Third, how do I identify the right consultant? And do I need to have them identified before applying? Generally, you will want to find a preservation specialist whose expertise is aligned with the type of collections you have and with your institution type. We have provided a few resources on page 31 of the NOFO that might point you in the right direction, but this list should not be considered exhaustive. And while it's not required that your consultant be identified, we find that the strongest projects have done so and include a letter of commitment from the consultant. Fourth, this NOFO is for both the 2021 and the 2022 deadline. Your organization may apply at both deadlines. And know that our program staff are here to help you in the application development phase. We cannot read drafts in this program, but we are happy to take your questions and to consult with you. The best way to reach us is by emailing preservation@neh.gov. And now there's time for questions. So I am going to briefly unmute my colleague, Adriana. Adriana, are you able to speak?
Hello, yes. So I am not seeing any questions in the question box at this time. However, I don't know if that's because of the way in which I am in the webinar.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go down the list then. I'm sorry that we did not.
Sorry about that. I hope to help answer the questions there, but.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Adriana and I can work together to answer them afterward as well and to follow up with you all. I have several people who did not have audio. How does this grant define small institution? We've done that. Someone asked, this is a good question, does the disaster designation have to be active at the time of application? Yes, it should be. We have CAP reports from 2009. Would it be appropriate to use these report recommendations without including a new consultation? We would like to purchase more data loggers, which in one of the CAP recommendations, and also have acquired an additional building since then. Yes, a CAP report, which is a conservation assessment program, is fine. And use your best judgment for how recent it should be, but I think that a report from 2009 would probably be fine, as long as you include a bit of context about how it has informed your work in the past decade. Our collections manager is a professional archivist and is qualified to assess supply and equipment needs. Would we need to first apply for a grant for an additional preservation assessment before applying for a grant for supplies or equipment? We do recommend that you have a formal assessment that recommends your supply purchases. However, it's not 100% necessary, and it is something that would be reviewed in the peer review process. So it's a bit of a judgment call there. If you think that you can make a good enough case for the qualifications of your archivist as a preservation specialist and for the work that you are doing, then it would be okay. But also it probably wouldn't hurt to have an outsider come in to look at your collection and provide some advice. Can you clarify what an appropriate item level conservation survey would look like for an organization that has already had a general conservation assessment? What would be appropriate between the general assessment and actual conservation? We do have an example in the sample narratives of an organization that had an item level survey. So for instance, if you had a portion of your collection that you wanted to do a project with soon, and you knew that it needed special treatment, then while this PAG program could not fund that treatment work, your conservator likely will need to get a closer look at those specific items in your collection to know exactly what type of work they would need to do and to develop a quote for you. And so that assessment is what the conservator can do. My organization is a bit different, as we have two parent organizations, one being a university and the other being a university foundation nonprofit. Are we eligible? Yes, you are eligible, and you would just need to pick which organization is more appropriate to be the applicant. Are PAGs available for religious organizations that have archives and/or art collections? If your religious organization is a 501c3, then it is eligible to apply. You would want to make sure in your application that you are not promoting any one particular agenda or religious point of view in your purpose of preserving the art collection or archives. But know, of course, that the history of religion is part of the humanities. And so you can absolutely apply and make your case. If we receive NEA funding, are we eligible for NEH funding? Congratulations on your NEA funding, that's wonderful. Yes, you are eligible for our funding. You just need to make sure that the activities you request funding for are not overlapping. This is a good question. What if our collections are not currently available to the public, but that is one of the goals that an NEH grant would help to support? You're in a bit of a catch-22. I think that if you can make a case for the fact that the grant would actually make your collections accessible and that you have the staff and the resources to make them accessible, then this could be okay. Additionally, you're going to need to make the case that someone wants to see your collections. So if you can provide some examples of how perhaps you've had a lot of inquiries and you just haven't been able to let people in, then I could see how that could work. But feel free to reach out to us directly if you want to discuss that further. Someone asked, yes, there will be a recording of this available later. It will be on NEH's YouTube channel, and it will also be on the program resource page for the Preservation Assistance Grants. Is an organization eligible if they have one full-time staff member dedicated both to the archive special collections and another department, like the Library Technical Services? Or must you have one full-time staff member dedicated only to archive special collections? I think you're probably in the clear here. What we want is to make sure that your collection has attention for about 30 to 40 hours a week at least. That portion of eligibility is targeted more at our all volunteer organizations that are applying, who would need to make a case that, for instance, some combination of volunteer board members and the work that they are doing on a collection add up to full time. Are there funds available for preservation projects for historic buildings without extensive collections? This is not going to be the right grant program for your historic building. You can do some building assessment work, but it needs to be focused on collections that are inside and the way that the building protects those collections. If you have a historic house, I would suggest, and you're not focused on the collections, you're rather focused on the building, I would suggest looking at either the Save America's Treasures grants or NEH's Infrastructure and Capacity Building Challenge grants. And I'm going to take about 2 more questions. May actual conservation treatment be part of consultations with preservation and conservation professionals? Unfortunately, conservation treatment work is not something we fund in this program. If that is something you are looking for funding for, please look at our Humanities Collections and Reference Resources grant program. And final question, I think this is a good one to end on, though we will try to follow up with the rest after this webinar ends. When are decisions made again for January submissions? The applicants will be notified sometime in August. So that is all for today, but thank you everyone so much for joining us. And remember, if we did not get to your question, or if you have any further ones that come up after this time, please reach out to us at preservation@neh.gov. Thank you.